Hello! Welcome to Live from the Abyss. This is Daath Nihilus. Tonight's show, we are going to have a special guest. Our guest will be Bob Mcdonald. He is a member of Ecclesia Babalon, a fellow member, I should say, of Ecclesia Babalon. So, welcome. Hello, welcome to the live. So I'm just waiting for, let's see, send an invite. There we go. Sent an invite. All right. Hello.
Right.
Hey, welcome to the live, man.
Well, thank you for having me. Do you hear me okay?
Yeah, I can hear you pretty good.
So what are we going to talk about?
Well, I wanted to kind of talk to you a little bit about Ecclesia Babalon and kind of your own spiritual journey, how you kind of got to this point a little bit, and what Ecclesia Babalon is all about.
My own spiritual journey is one of pretty radical amalgamation. I was raised in an Irish Catholic home. My grandmother had been a nun, a Benedictine nun. Before she met my grandfather, she became my primary spiritual influence in how I kept the Catholic accent in my spirituality, as I say, in that you don't lose things that are foundationally part of you. Even though the theology went away, the beauty of the practice, the words of St. Hildegard and others still resonated. However, theologically, me and the church were not compatible anymore. So I went on that journey that we all go on that leads to point A, point B, point C. And then about 4 years ago now, or maybe 5 years ago, I was ordained a priest in the Gnostic sacramental tradition in 2016. I had been involved in aspects of independent sacramentalism my whole childhood and adulthood up to that point. But I went through a 2-year training process, apprenticeship, and I was ordained. There was issues with the community because there was, at the time, the community I was in, an individual that was in prison for a sex offense that was being supported by some of the leadership of the community. So those of us that caught wind of that left. In about 2018 is when I was consecrated by T.L. in Greenfield. And then I was eventually cross-consecrated with a liberal Catholic bishop named Dr. Jeremy Orozco. And through that, I was introduced to individuals in the community, many in Brazil and here in North America, and we developed what became the kernel of Ecclesia Babalon. And then over the last 3 years, it has consistently developed to what it is now. So it began small, but it's grown substantially in that time.
Okay. Explain a little bit about what independent sacramentalism for those who may not be familiar with it.
Okay. So I guess about 100 years ago, a little over 100 years ago, the Utrecht diocese in the Catholic Church broke away. They formed what became the Utrecht Union. Many old Catholic bishops, of course, they became known as the Old Catholics. That was like the term they were called, but the official title is the Utrecht Union. There were bishops, Bishop Ledbetter and I think Bishop Wedgwood. I'm having trouble recalling names, but I look it up and it's there. they got involved in theosophy and started mixing in theosophical practices in with old Catholic practices. And the Utrecht Union said, that's not really us. You're going to have to go your own separate way. So they did, and thus the liberal Catholic Church was formed. Independent sacramentalism are those movements that are post-Protestant, so they're not part of the Protestant community unless they actively, make a decision to go in that direction. But they're essentially spiritual Catholics that have maintained the episcopal polity of the role of priesthood, and they still administer all the sacraments and practice their faith in accordance with the traditional praxis of Catholicism, but the theology has been changed at times very radically. And so in the world, you have a large movement of what's known as independent sacramentalism. Certain authors, John P. Plummer, wrote a book called The Many Paths of the Independent Sacramental Movement. I think that's what the title is. There was another book written called The Other Catholics. Priests, Gnostics, and Magicians is another book that kind of chronicles and details the becoming of this movement. And so really, in that 100+ years, independent sacramentalism has created a culture all on its own. Introducing then, at the same time this is all happening with the Utrecht Union and the liberal Catholic Church, in France you have the revitalization of the French Gnostic community by Jules Doinel and others. And within about a generation, all of those communities had started cross-pollinating with each other. Maybe less than that. Maybe after about 10 years or so, those communities started finding each other and started giving each other consecrations as a way to, I guess, shore up their legitimacy in the face of the crushing weight of the Catholic Church, which had a lot more power than it does now. And so what independent sacramentalism is in the modern sense is really an amalgamation of all of those traditions in some way, even though there are many folks that will maintain a self-imposed purity of practice. So they'll say, well, I'm old Catholic, I don't do the Gnostic stuff. And you have that going on in the scene. And then you have people like me that came from communities that were a healthy, active mix of all of it. So that, of course, leads to free illuminism, because T. Allen Greenfield, of course, is a consecrated Gnostic bishop and has been in the scene for a long time. He's a student of Michael Berdiau. And he started doing, of course, the work within free illuminism that in 2018 I became, well, in 2017 or maybe even earlier, I was familiar with it. And in that time, that nuance of esotericism has found its way into many branches of independent sacramental thought, Ecclesia Babalon being one of them. And the real crux, I believe, in my opinion, of free illuminism is the freedom of association, freedom of gathering, and not creating an inflexible hierarchy. Instead, focusing on guardianships and helping individuals get to that place that you are also at. So the true goal of independent sacramentalism is not to have Tao who hold the mantle at the top and then everyone else. It's to get everyone to the top. That's why in our community there's such a people notice that there's an imbalance in the number of priests to parishioners, right, as they say. But that's the whole goal, is to introduce everyone into priestcraft and to methods of sacramental behavior, because all of these traditions focus on that. And then, of course, in Ecclesia Babalon, you have our introduction by members from Bhakti. You have members in Brazil that are practitioners of Umbanda and Kimbanda. All of these things have seasoned and influenced the overall practice of our community. So we, in many ways, we stand so differently from other Thelemite organizations, but we're also equally as different from the Gnostic sacramental ones. And we're definitely different from a lot of the other Bhakti currents.
Ecclesia Babylon's kind of creating its own niche corner within the sacramental occult sphere.
Yeah, they are. And my wife just came home. That's why my dog's barking.
Okay.
More than that, I think we're trying to create a space to where everyone can explore all the facets of their spiritual curiosity and not feel like they have to cut and run when they don't align perfectly with what everyone else is doing. We're first and foremost wanting to build a community of support and upliftment, and we are and have been for the last few years actively working together as an international community to develop the best method of praxis for ourselves, the best method of seeing to the needs of all of the membership. So it is accurate to say that it's very hard to apply hard and fast rules onto us in regards to polemic theology or Gnostic theology because we have developed something so different.
Okay.
But we're still part. It's like I liken it. I lost my earbud. That's why I'm looking over here. I liken it to people that have parents and grandparents, right? And that's all of us.
Right.
Whether we know them or not, we all have them parents. We all have them grandparents, and we're all descended from their makeup. So while I may look like my grandfather, I may have my grandma's attitude a little bit. You know what I'm saying? As someone that comes from a family, I'm the product of the descent of that heritage. We see our ecclesia as being guardians of a heritage, and that heritage has that heritage has grandparents that are Thelema, Gnostic sacramentalism, Bhakti, other forms of Hermeticism.
Right.
All of those things blend in to create, of course, the new person. And so we allow our membership the freedom, and it's not even allow, I think that's a bad way to say it. We encourage our membership to explore the concepts of magic and devotion as far as they need to personally, and to tell us what they find and to bring it back to our community so that we can also learn and develop and not be stuck in a state of stasis. Because I think in the occult world, a lot of times people confuse guardianship with rigidity and elitism, and the two really are very distinct. And you can say that you're guarding a system so much that you create still water and it becomes
right, you become a gatekeeper.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
I said, you become a gatekeeper by by guarding it so rigidly.
But it's also fair to say that there has to be a modicum of guidance and help and support for seekers that are going through the process. So we hope that we're achieving a culture in our community of allowing people to realize that they have the freedom to be themselves, and they'll be supported as individuals that want to freely associate with our community. And as they get to know us, we get to know them, and that's where the change really starts to happen among people. When you have people that are meeting other people that they would never have met before, working together on concepts and ideas, getting feedback from people all over the world in a positive way. It seems it's a little more rare these days than it should be. To go somewhere and to not feel like you have to be on complete defense of your spiritual walk, or you might particularly be, or this idea that we as practitioners of the occult and of the esoteric parts, that we're supposed to have it all figured out from the jump. And so nothing we do can be questioned, and nothing we do can change, and nothing. That's not humanity. That's just not how we are as people. If I don't think a community is growing, eventually everyone's going to grow out of it. And so our hope as we've developed Ecclesia Babalon has been to create an environment in which people can feel the freedom and support, not just lip service we give, but they go to our message boards, they go to our groups, they go to our meets, and they can see in our gatherings, and they see our behavior and how people are treated. That's important in this community. That because there's so many times personally, I've gone to communities, I've sought teaching, I've sought this, I've sought that, and it was like I had to defend everything I had done up to that point. You know, it's like I had to go through some kind of heightened scrutiny because what I was doing didn't fit the mold that they had been conditioned to think they were supposed to keep unchanging. So our hope is that in Ecclesia Babalon, that's not something people are going to, even if they grow out of what we're doing and need to go somewhere else, the hope is that they're not going to think, man, these people really constricted me. I wasn't able to grow. I want people to feel like, you know what, I worked with them for a bit, even if they don't stay a long time, I want them to say, these are good people, these are sincere folks, because so often our sincerity is questioned in this community, which I think is very toxic. So as long as we're able to share that culture within the community and help to try to uplift people, then we're doing the right stuff. At least that's my take on it. I'm pretty sure that everyone else in the formative leadership of the community would say the same thing. And our society is international at this point.
Right. You have you're part of the North American chapter, and there's another chapter in Brazil, correct?
We have members in Canada. We have members in, of course, which is North America, Canada, America, Mexico. We have membership. There is the mother community is in Brazil, and that's the Four Gates Sanctuary community.
Right.
And that was the community that I worked with them almost exclusively in the development of Ecclesia Babalon before I turned my eyes to North America, because it's it's a different type of environment in North America than it is in Brazil when it comes to Polema. And I can definitely say that there's more room for, from what I've experienced, there's more room for the understanding of divergent ideas, and there's more emphasis people put on the time it takes to get to know someone before you make a judgment on them. So it created an ability for me to really not only have to relearn certain things that my injury had kind of knocked out of my head, but also redevelop my own sense of enjoyment of practice, because at that point, when Ecclesia Babalon was formed, I was at a burned out place because there had been all of the dramas I'd mentioned before that can cause so much problems in the community.
Right.
So then once we started building in North America, the community in Brazil grew incredibly so. And so now it's different even than it was a year ago. How do you feel about oath of obligation to fraternity and to your fratres and sores? Well, obligation is something we do, so I can't say that I disagree with it. I think it's important. That can be weaponized, I think, because you can say, well, you've been given an oath and now you have to deal with all my shit. Well, that's not really the point of an oath of fidelity and faithfulness. But they're important. But at the same time, minds change, and if someone takes an oath and they're not treated right and they want to leave, they should have freedom to do that. I hope I answered that
Right.
question.
Yeah, that was a very good question. What do you what got you interested in Thelema?
I've been involved in the study of it almost my whole life at this point. I got into it very young, like a lot of us. There was this conversation we had on our thread where we were talking about how between 10 to about 13 years old, it seems to be the standard from where everyone said, hey, the first time I heard of Aleister Crowley, or the first time I started reading the Book of the Law, which I didn't understand, of course, who does that first time. That happens early. And then, of course, what a lot of people don't talk about is how the majority of their exposure in those first early years to Thelema comes from the Time Life Mysteries of the Unknown series, where they see the pictures of him, right? That was the first thing that made me go, what is this guy really, really doing? Who is he really? The pictures captivated me. The photography that he took was itself, I see it now as being so critical to his whole mission, because the pictures themselves are inspirational and motivated me to learn more about the tradition. So I reached out to, when I was young, my first attempt to reach out to someone in the Thelemic community happened at about 16. I was not treated well at all, so I didn't pursue engaging in active community Thelema for a very long time, because I kind of had a handful of rugged experiences from people that had represented leadership in some substantial communities. And it wasn't really until about 4 years ago where people started noticing that I was bleeding too much Thelema, as they said. They're like, you just, everything that you think and talk, it's they couldn't, I guess, at the time, the community didn't want to accept the amalgamation of it. A lot of people had, in the Gnostic community that I was part of, they had critical views of Crowley, they had critical views of Parsons, which I didn't share. Some of them were just flat out disinterested. Me and Talis, we were two of the ones that were very much like, we believed that a sacramental community, a devotional society could occur. And through that practice of devotion, we could glean new insight. So the work to, I wouldn't say actively blend things, but just be ourselves began then. And at that point, the way Ecclesia Babalon looked was entirely different. It seemed to be more in line with what you would consider to be a Gnostic, sacramental, Catholic influenced church. Our Mass was essentially unchanged. All of our stuff, we started to slowly bring things in because we wanted to express those things ourselves in ritual, and we didn't have an outlet to do that. So for the most part, it was, at the time, it was, this isn't happening with anyone else that we know. The ones that do have these communities are very closed, and so there was no getting to know these people. So we decided to do it ourselves, so that we had a place and a space to be. And it was me and 6 other people and a few folks in Brazil. And then at that point, one of our brothers, Paulo, down in Brazil, developed the call. And that was the turning point for us in the community, is when the call was created.
Explain the significance and meaning of the call.
So the call is a rite that we perform in 2 ways. We have the 77-day self-initiatory process called the Call to Babylon, which what we have found through experience is that the egregoric presence of Babylon, the potency increases during this 77-day working. into an almost physical presence when you're in that process. So the hope was that people who were having trouble understanding, I guess the most important thing I should say is that I've always been a devotee of the Holy Mother. You know, we can go way back even to my Catholic roots. Every
Right.
Saturday, I was going on rosary pilgrimages with my grandma. My prayers to the Virgin have never ceased. I consider myself a devotee as much of Mary as Mary Theotokos, Mary Magdalene, every incarnation of the divine feminine in the spiritual walk. I've gleaned a great amount of comfort, and with my own personal history, I have relied heavily on the presence of the divine feminine in my spiritual life. That was the other thing, is that my focus and my dedication to Babylon started increasing almost supernaturally as I was going through these processes in the early days with Ecclesia Babalon, but coming to the understanding of this polemic Gnostic sacramental dynamic, which is different than the EGC, and the praxis and the devotional culture of it is different. So I know it's, for those that are looking in, it's that don't maybe understand how different we are. It's easy to say, oh, you're just kind of trying to do something else all over again, but it's not what happened. It's not what's come of it, right? So our focus has always been, as a community, forwarding the essence and the energy of the divine feminine and bringing it about at the age of the mother. It's something I take on with missionary zeal. I see, and others have seen, that the balance of the patriarchy has created a precipice in which we're going to either have to jump off of and fly, or be pushed off of and fall. And we feel that the Holy Mother will give us the wings to fly. So in an age when the divine masculine has been perverted through ages of examples, right, we decided that it is time to focus our devotion on this energy, on this presence. And we see Babylon as the sum total amalgamation of all the blessings of the Holy Mother. It doesn't mean that Babylon, our understanding of the divine is that everything, like a river, flows into one another. All of these partitions at times that hermeticists put up when they say, oh, you can't do that because it's not on that spherode of the tree, or you can't do that because it's not on Wednesday. That doesn't apply in devotional service. Devotion, bhakti, is the yearning for the divine presence. That's really the focus more than working. And while there's aspects of magical working in our community, and we have rites and rituals, my focus has always been on devotional manifestation.
Okay.
So we started, and we started to see that the nature of the Lema changed after the 156 current was implemented, which happened during the great working of Jack Parsons. We saw that there was
Yeah, I was going to ask you about how the legacy of Jack Parsons kind of fits into Ecclesia Babalon with the whole Babylon working and stuff like that.
pretty centrally. We, of course, are a community of vast variety. So not only do we have witchcraft in our community, but we have ceremonial magicians, chaos magicians, Gnostic bishops, former members of Thelemic lodges and orders and circles. And they've all come rallying around the understanding that when that working happens, something changes. Now, of course, there's disagreements among people within the community even on the nature of that change and how that's going to impact the overall community in the future. but I believe that Jack Parsons has played a pivotal role in Thelemic history, and that he still has a role to play in the future.
I think honestly, I think Jack Parsons, as far as the modern state of Thelema, especially within the 156 current, definitely is more prevalent now um, than some of the other contemporaries. Though I will say that Kenneth Grant seems to be a very big influence with some of the aspects. Yes, Parsons is based, but Kenneth Grant seems to be a kind of an underlying influence to Ecclesia Babalon.
Well, through the aspects of Typhonianism, which is really, in my view, a form of chaos. Everyone, I think, it gets hyper rigid on what Typhonianism really is, but Typhonianism is, you're taking things that people, like for instance, the Lovecraftian mythos, and you're bringing it into a more serious light. Well, some people can look at that and say, what are you doing? And then other people can look at it and say, well, that's brilliant. So, to me, all the problems that people have with Kenneth Grant don't take away from the fact that he did Thelema a service by showing that you could have a radically different expression of the same theological structure. So to me, Typhonianism is a map on how to be daringly experimental with your practice. Because I don't see ultimately Typhonianism as being outside of the family tree. It's still part of the family tree.
Yeah.
And I think we don't think about that kind of stuff. We think about inclusion and exclusion because, of course, that's the dualistic idea that we've been conditioned with ourselves.
Yeah, the whole sectarian, view of OTO is the correct Thelemic organization, or AA, which AA is a whole other can of worms. But really, they're all part of the same umbrella, the same, like you said, family tree. And another aspect of
the saying is, it's a big Thanksgiving dinner. Everyone's there. Everyone's in the family. So, yeah.
One of the other aspects of Ecclesia Babalon that I think is important for people who may not be familiar with the organization is the incorporation of chaos magic and that kind of framework within individual spiritual development.
Yeah. So chaos is the sauce that makes progress happen in many ways. You have to have individuals that are daring enough to do something that doesn't fall within the preset guidelines of how something's supposed to happen. All of these great thinkers, all of these movers in Thelemic history have usually been on the shit end of people's sticks whenever they were alive. No one liked the way they were adding that chaos in. And you add the chaos in by taking concepts that you wouldn't have considered, concepts that people, maybe your superiors, aren't comfortable with you doing, and you experiment and try it anyway. Everyone talks about how you can get hurt or you can get misled or this. And I think that's just what people say in order to knock other people down. Because if you don't take a risk in the practice of magic or in the devotion to gods, or if you don't take risks, then you're going to be controlled at some point. You have to be free enough to appreciate, if you choose to, the working within a community, but also have a sense of understanding your own integrity and your own spiritual sincerity. Because, like I said, sincerity in the fact that we are devotionally approaching our deity is not considered too often, because so much of our thinking as occultists is lodge setting, magical lodges, orders, instead of devotional societies, communities of prayer, on and on. So, yeah, chaos is important.
Awesome.
It's important for all of us.
Exactly. The other question I wanted to ask is what would you say about some of the detractors of the 156 current and kind of the take that they have with Ecclesia Babalon and such?
Well, I've never been in a situation where 100% of the people have said, "Hey, man, you're right on." And definitely in this community, I've grown up in it in many ways, so I'm used to the passive aggressive kind of judgments that can be thrown our way. But the reality is, the people that have been the most critical of us have taken the least amount of time to get to know us. So, the ones that have the biggest problems with us when they have been in the community are the ones that simply want to steal everything for themselves, repackage it, and put it off as if it's theirs and not the working of an entire community of people. So,
Okay.
those things can happen, and there's nothing we can do to avoid any of it. Not a thing. All we can do is keep being ourselves, keep enjoying what we're doing, and enjoying our friendship with each other and our time together, and let these other people sit on the bench or wherever they're wanting to sit and just bitch about us. They remind me of those two old dudes in the Muppets. Remember? I can't remember their names. But that's, it's so common in the community that it has to be seen as a little comical, because you can almost set your watch to it. I know there are certain people in certain communities that are going to say certain things, always. And every time it's happened, I've never been surprised. I've been bummed. I've been like, oh, all right, but I've never sat there and been shocked at how could they think that? How could they? Because it's usually obvious. They're wanting to be an authority. They're wanting to be the voice of something. And they assume that we're trying to come in and take it all over. And we're not. We're trying to exist without being bullied spiritually by people. That's when you look at all of the Phelamite groups that have come up, a lot of it is due to trying to avoid being bullied. We can't avoid it in this community, so we have to accept it. But it shouldn't daunt us. It shouldn't prohibit us from still trying to achieve, still trying to reach out, still trying to be good people to each other. Okay. Even with my imperfections, because I can get in arguments with people just as much as they can criticize me. I can take the higher road at times when I don't. So it's always a work in progress.
You were talking earlier about the structure of Ecclesia Babalon and how the organization kind of operates. Could you explain that a little bit for people?
Our organization is essentially flat, which might seem paradoxical when we have an order of priesthood. However, those roles are understood to be ones of responsibility. So essentially, everyone is a first circle member that comes in officially in the ecclesia. Makes them a theurgist, makes them a practitioner. all of us that are in this are first circle members. And then you have individuals that wish to lead communities, that wish to gather others to help give them space to express their spiritual walk. Those people that want to serve, and they also want to serve the community of Ecclesia Babalon specifically as well. Those people take on the second circle. And then for those of us that are consecrated as bishops, that's where the real rigor of responsibility comes in, because the requirements for those of us that are consecrated is one of absolute service to the community. We serve the community before we serve ourselves. And those in our community, there have been members that have left, and members that, and when that happens, it's because those kind of responsibilities that we all agree to, the things that we come to expect from each other, those are things that they don't want to accept, and that's fine, and they can then go do whatever they want, right? But we do feel the need to create a guardianship of the community, so that someone comes in and they're just not like told any old thing and be made to feel like we believe in one thing or do one thing, or that bullying is okay. Like, we've had people come in and bring a lot of that toxic stuff into our community, and we have to tell them, hey, you can't do that here, you know. And it has to be those of us in the third and second circles that step up to make sure that folks in the first circles aren't being bullied, aren't being treated bad, aren't being, right? So it's responsibility in free association, like any relationship is. Because if we don't look at spiritual communities like relationships, then we've already lost. And relationships need nurturing, they need time, they need boundaries. All of those things in a community we hope to establish for others. So does this mean then that whatever I say goes without question? No. Of course, as we've all talked about, no one person has complete authority in our community. And everyone must be answerable for the behavior they have and the things they say. And not only answerable, but answerable to everyone in the community, not just a little group that you work with. But if I do something messed up, you have a right to understand what I was thinking. That's the obligation. When we talked about obligation, those are the things that are important within an obligation. You can take a vow to be someone's servant or be subject to some rules and laws and stuff, but taking an obligation to know the community, to help build the community, to help be there for people, these are things that are important for any relationship structure that doesn't need to be thrown out just because we are also simultaneously suspect of hierarchy. Because hierarchy, as I've said, can be very toxic. You know, if it's done with the understanding of ruling people and setting these fixed ideas. That's something that's never occurred with us, so it's not been something internally we've had problems with. You know, and then when the problems, like when certain things that I had previously mentioned have arise, the community has handled it altogether. So we're flat.
Okay.
And absolutely intersectional. I want to say that.
Absolutely intersectional.
Absolutely intersectional. We are not TERFs. We do not support TERFing. We don't support brainy smurfing. We don't like any of that shit. Or I don't. We believe that people need the freedom to be alive, to be themselves, and we believe in the garden of wildflowers. You can't do that by pruning all the purple plants.
True. Very true. So trying to think of another question I can ask you. I'm trying to give people watching kind of a beginner's perspective. Oh, I know what I can ask you. How does one go about becoming a first circle member?
Okay. If you have a kid, you have to donate them to the church. I'm just kidding. How does someone become a first circle member? You do it very simply by going through the 77-day call. You do that by um, stating the creed in front of the community. Those are the two things. The 77-day call is not as easy as everyone thinks initially, and
I
it
can.
becomes a bit of it is a bit of a crucible, especially. I mean, everything's cooking when you're in like day 25, but when you're in day 62, it gets heavy. And the fact that our ceremony is the same, it doesn't change with each day. It's the same rite every day for 77 days. After you're done with that, you have the option to take the creed in front of the community. That's when you're accepted into the first circle. There's been many people that have done the call that have not taken the creed, and that's their right. We have a lot of folks that have done the call as an exercise, a personal practice, but they didn't feel like they had to then join the community. They still have our friendship. They still are invited to the gatherings, all of that.
Good night, 93.
93, good night.
So, trying to think here. Are there any bases you think I missed?
No, I think you got them. I think you got a lot of them. You got more than what I thought you were going to bring up. Some questions for you. What do you think of all of this so far? What do you think of coming into the Ecclesia? What were your, did you have assumptions? What were the things that you noticed about us? I ask everyone that. So
Right. Well, I think when I first got involved with Ecclesia Babalon, I came into this not really knowing much of anything. The only thing, because like I had mentioned before on my very first live, was that I was struggling to maintain a personal practice, and coming, I had been following you for a little while at that point, and I saw that you mentioned, the call, and I was, interested in that. And interestingly enough, I had just bought a prayer beads, a rosary, off of Etsy, and it had the same. It had 49 beads on it, so it was perfect. And so I started doing the call the first day that I saw that, and I was like, well, how do I I mean, I could do the call every day, but how do the people, that are, keeping track, I keep track, and how do they keep track that I'm actually doing it every day, and that I can help, commit myself to doing that 77-day ritual. And so I decided to incorporate images and text and stuff that were kind of, connected to Babylon and connected to the things I observed. Though I think when it comes to the great example of that, I think our sibling Kendall definitely did a great job when it came to um, her breaking down of the call, uh,
yeah,
line by line, and I loved her insights into that. And I kind of felt a little, I felt a little green, in the fact that a lot of the things that she was talking about, I had no concept of. You know, I had just started getting into Thelema, like, I want to say, you know, being a hard, you know, self-professed Thelemite at that point, about 4 or 5 months. You know, my 1 year is in, I think, June or July. I actually have a date set on the calendar of when I actually like said, you know, this is when I professed to being a Thelemite,
Right.
and you know, that was that's my Thelemic birthday.
Right on.
um, so so yeah, I mean, I came
The,
into
the
this.
one thing that you touched on something that I find interesting that has occurred with the call, in that everyone is dressing their sandwich a little differently. So I kind of see say you see the call as the sandwich, right? And everyone's
Yep.
putting their toppings on it to make it something that they particularly like. That to me is exciting, because because following the formula of the right, but allowing interpersonal self-expression, allowing a person to explore to the fullness how far that devotional reach can go for themselves. It's exciting. So I love seeing something that we encourage, because this method is such a solitary practice. Is we encourage in our community, especially the sharing of images and pictures, and that's where a lot of people start getting insight and inspiration and talking back and forth about concepts and ideas that they might want to incorporate and apply. We've learned methods and techniques. All of us have learned rites and rituals and traditions that we didn't know before, didn't have access to. For instance, when you develop the rosary, um, while we have our japa method with the mantra work during the call, and that's an aspect of it, having that traditional rosary that you crafted, the traditional 5-decade rosary, um, it really hit home for me, and it's something that I personally use quite often, whereas someone else may do another facet of some of the practices that have been introduced. So I find that the call has been great in allowing people to get closer to their own sense of self-expression, which is important for us in our community. Like, we don't want people to come into our community and feel bogged down and controlled. That would be horrible to turn into those type of people. I want people to feel free, to feel adventurous, and to feel and to understand that they're in a safe space.
Totally, totally. And I think that, you know, when it comes to Ecclesia Babylon, you know, the different, you know, Kindle, for example, has her own thing, and I want to I would love to have her on one of my lives to
Yeah.
talk the stuff that she's doing for sure. And then of course we have our other siblings. I believe I'm going to probably say this wrong, but it's Tuat Abbey. Is that correct?
Templum Tuat, yes, in Florida.
Yeah.
Brienne
Yeah.
and
They have the triune ritual that they do. That is
because they're bishops of the Thelemic order as well. And of course, that's another thing in our community. We don't require you to be a member of only one group. I mean, a lot of us are members of different things outside of Ecclesia Babylon. That would be weird to me to require that kind of mainstream fundamentalist behavior on the people that are essentially free-thinking folks. So they are a part of the Thelemic order as well as Ecclesia Babylon, and so they were able to be introduced, like they have their practice every Monday night, and that's something that everyone is invited to. The TTO, the EB folks, they can all go there and share in time and talk and learn traditions and practices. It's all good, you know. And then we've got our siblings up in Canada. that are doing good work, and all of them are in a solitary situation right now. But at the same time, their work online is really very impressive and formidable. Whenever you give a person the chance to shine, they will, you know. And you can't. A person won't shine if they're being told that their every little curiosity or desire to experiment is some bad, noxious thing that's, you know, that's where the chaos comes in. You got to let the people be, and that's
Exactly.
how the community goes.
Well, I want to give. We are at the 5 minute mark. So I want to give you an opportunity to let everybody know where people can find you on social media and stuff.
Okay, so I'm on Pineapple Abbey Official. That's my Pineapple Abbey. People have asked what that is. That's my crib. Pineapple Abbey is not like a building that I rent or anything. It's my house in my altar room. Pineapple Abbey. It's where when people come to visit me, all of the work happens. You can find us on www.ecclesiababalon.com in North America. In Brazil, it's www.4gsanctuary.com. And all of that is mostly in Portuguese, but there's some English material too. Yeah. What else? We got some other sites. We got a website cooking right now. It's going to be a more refined, reformed website, but that's still a little bit away. So right now it's just the website we have up. And you can write to me, write to you, Wade, write to anyone if they have a question or want to get to know us. If anyone wants to join, we have a message thread on Facebook Messenger. Of course, the rule of that is be kind, be courteous, and everyone is. So if anyone wants to join that, and then we also have a Discord.
I was going to mention that.
Yeah, which I am not on as much as I should be. I tend to be more on the Messenger chat, and other folks tend to be more on the Discord. But we're all everywhere, so you'll see all of it. And that's how you. Does anyone have any questions? Because I can't see any of what anyone's typing. If they are.
And everyone can find me on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Vero at Daath Nihilus, Daath Nihilus. Yeah. Any quick questions, real quick? We got 3 minutes.
Although I will say that we first met, now that I'm thinking about it, over our shared love of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles cartoon, and I think also the Ghostbusters. I think that was our first thing, because I asked you if you had any clips of the Inhumanoids. And I was like, do you have any clips of that old cartoon Inhuman? And that's how me and you got talking about all this. Really,
Yeah. Yep, for sure. It was great having you on, man. And I look forward. We have a question, I think. When you mentioned the origin of Levias Levy.
Well, we're in good company then. He as well was a cradle Catholic, and
Any opinions on Albert Pike?
Albert Pike. I'm a okay.
Yeah, he's a kind of
Albert Pike, I don't give a lot of credence to, because I have trouble being okay with his personal behavior in history.
We got 27 seconds, so unfortunately I'm going to have to cut it short. Anyways, 156.93.
Yeah, 156.93.
Thank you for being on.
No problem. It was great to be on. I'll see you later.
Bye.